We begin the day with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Is he betting on a better Belarus? A Belarus when leader Alexander Lukashenko has become history. Ukraine has been warning for weeks that Russia could once again use Belarusian territory to threaten the country from the north. Now, that is reviving nightmare memories from the start of the war when Russian troops crossed the border from Belarus in the push towards Kyiv. Well, today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy sat down with exiled Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. Both were in Kyiv at a summit to bring together all of Ukraine's friendly neighbors. Ukrainian officials have been sounding alarms about what Belarus could mean militarily. But today, Zelenskyy struck a different tone politically. Zelenskyy posted on X, "We all support the aspiration of the Belarusian people to free themselves from Russian interference. And we know that Russia is now trying to drag Belarus even deeper into this war against Ukraine. Ukraine has never been a threat to Belarus, drawing a clear distinction between Alexander Lukashenko's regime and the Belarusian people themselves." So is this just symbolism, or is Kyiv trying to shape what Belarus looks like after the war, and is it trying to do that before Moscow does? I want to pull in Pavel Slunkin. He's a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. He's also a former political analyst for the Belarusian Foreign Ministry, a former insider, if you will. Pavel, it's good to have you with us. Ukraine has been warning about the possibility of Russia using Belarus yet again to launch attacks. Now, President Zelenskyy, he's publicly reaching out to Belarusian Democrats, including the exiled opposition leader. So it looks like Belarus, our enemy, Belarus, our ally. Why do you think we're seeing Zelenskyy send these two messages at the same time?
Well, I think the reason is the new administration in the White House. With the new foreign policy approach towards Belarus coming from Donald Trump administration, we are seeing that the approach has changed. Now the United States are trying to lobby for lifting of sanctions from Belarus. They're lobbying for engaging more with the current regime in Belarus. And I think in Kyiv, they just see it as a threat, as a security threat, as a political threat. So when the United States took the responsibility for sanctioning Belarusian regime, for pushing it, then there was no reason for Ukraine to provoke Minsk and Lukashenko once again. But when such a big country, such a powerful country is lobbying for Minsk, then I think Ukraine is afraid that the same approach can one day find itself in Moscow. And that's why I think they're trying to stop that. So they just are doing what they have been asked to do for many years, since February 2022, cooperating with the democratic forces in exile.
President Zelenskyy has said that Ukraine has never been a threat to Belarus. When he says that, who is he speaking to? I mean, is that aimed at Lukashenko? Is it aimed at ordinary people in Belarus, or is it aimed at Ukraine's Western allies?
I think it's both. It's both Lukashenko and his regime. So the generals who would be, if something happens, they would have to send the people to start the war, to stop Russians again to invade Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. But secondly, and maybe most importantly, it's also the message to the people. In Ukraine, they know that statistic, that the polling, they're showing that Belarusians don't want to be part of the war. I think there is only 3 to 4% of Belarusians who would like to join the war in Ukraine on Russia's side, but while 97% of Belarusians are just against that. So I think that's the message, that Ukraine is not a threat to you, and we are not going to do anything against you, your people, your family, your interests, your country, until you do something harmful to us. And this already happened some years ago. So in 2022, the aggression has been launched from the territory of Belarus, and then Ukraine did not retaliate, but now they are saying that they will.
Do you think that Kyiv is trying to politically separate Belarus from Russia, at the same time preparing for a possible military threat coming from Belarusian territory? I mean, is it trying to do these two things at once?
I think they don't believe that there is enough leverage in Minsk, in Lukashenko's regime, to stand up against Putin's decisions. So I think that in their belief is if Putin wants to launch an aggression from the territory of Belarus, there is not much what Lukashenko can really do. But they're just trying to make them think twice before they agree and maybe try better to stand up against Putin. Because there were a lot of rumors that Putin has been trying to pressure, allegedly, again, I'm highlighting that, allegedly pressuring Lukashenko to join the war, which I don't believe happened. And now there is another time when they are returning to that message that, again, allegedly Russia is pressuring Lukashenko to join the war, at least to help them attack Ukraine once again. What I missed here is the indicators of that. If in February 2022 we saw that indicators, there was Russian army, there were the military drills, there was a preparation for the invasion. Now I see almost none. Also, I don't see any pressure from Moscow coming, like to pressuring Lukashenko to join the war.
So this renewed fear, then, you don't think it's grounded in facts or what's happening on the ground?
Well, at least I don't see it. I believe that maybe President Macron, who just talked to Lukashenko, or President Zelenskyy, who has so much more information than I do, maybe they do see that. But again, if I analyze what my colleagues in Europe, some people who work in special services or in the governments, what they do, or centers who can basically monitor and have been monitoring the situation in Belarus for all these years, there was nothing new, like really in the new. Like in the nearest months, in the recent month. What Zelenskyy publicly claimed were basically two facts. One is that Belarusian regime is building roads, so kind of a building infrastructure on the border of Ukraine, which may hint or may not hint that they are planning something like that. And the second fact is that they allegedly captured the discussion between Russian and Belarusian officials, where Russians have been were asking Belarusians to help them with that invasion and to help them maybe join in the war. And that is the basis for their new message to Europe that the threat is real. But again, it is in my for me as a political analyst, it is not enough to claim that that is the real possibility in the near time.
I want to ask you a little bit.
At least I don't see it now.
Okay. I want to ask you a little bit about Tsikhanouskaya's visit to Kyiv and the way it's being seen. I mean, it's being described as symbolic, but symbolism in wartime often carries political meanings as well. I mean, what does she gain from being there now?
Oh, it's a very symbolically important visit. She wanted to be and to be welcomed in Kyiv since basically the invasion, when all of the European leaders, her allies, all of their Western leaders even, they traveled to the United States. They had communication, cooperation with Ukraine. They wanted to share that feeling that they're standing up for Ukraine. While for Belarus, Ukraine's position was kind of ambiguous, I would say. So there were people who fought for Ukraine, Belarusians who fought for Ukraine. Some of them were former political prisoners, while officially the government of Ukraine never wanted to communicate with Tsikhanouskaya and her team. And it raised a lot of questions. Why is that happening? I believe that was happening because they didn't want to trigger Lukashenko. They didn't want additional threats on their border. And now, as I told you in the beginning, Trump is in the White House and he's doing what they don't like. So maybe there is the time when Tsikhanouskaya is better to be welcome in Kyiv and to cooperate, to work with her, just to show that there is another person. And Tsikhanouskaya is lobbying for sanctions against the regime, a kind of an alternative face of Belarus who you can cooperate with. And in these times, when your main ally, the United States, are lobbying for Lukashenko, maybe it's better to lobby for Tsikhanouskaya, so they invite her to Kyiv. I'm unfortunately quite skeptical about what Tsikhanouskaya personally and her team can deliver She doesn't have any rockets, any missiles. She doesn't have billions of dollars to help Ukraine. She doesn't even can send people who would help to fight for Ukraine. So it's more of a, as you said, political symbolism. But it's very important for many Belarusians living in exile, even for me specifically, as someone who also lives in exile, and we have been waiting for that to happen for many years. And I'm happy to see that finally happening, that their sacrifice that Belarusians are paying for Ukraine is now being welcomed in Kyiv.
Yeah, well, optics do matter, especially when we're talking about issues such as war and peace. Let me ask you, before we run out of time, what matters more for the future of Belarus? Events on the battlefield in Ukraine or political developments inside Belarus itself?
Oh, there is the third option. There's a political development in Moscow, unfortunately. I would want to give you one of that two reasons that you mentioned, but I believe that in the current position, in the current geopolitical situation, we almost don't have any real chances for change until something shifts in Moscow that would make them to loosen a bit their grip over Belarus. They are now controlling Belarus militarily, informationally, politically, financially. All of the sources that they have, they would apply if something revolutionary happening in Belarus. Sorry. But when Russia is too focused on their domestic issues, maybe weakened by economy, maybe losing again the battle, the war in Ukraine very hardly, very tough, then maybe we will be having another chance. But if something if the status quo now keeps, then I don't believe that there is just a real opportunity for the change.
Pavel Slunkin. Pavel, good to have you on the program. We appreciate you sharing your insights. It's good to get the picture, particularly through your eyes as someone who has been inside the halls of power in Belarus. Thank you.
Thank you.